Welcome to the Glen Mercer Show, where we talk all things vegan. If you're not already vegan, no worries, we'll get you there. If you are, tune in for health advice, information on climate change, and all the damage done by our most destructive industry, animal agriculture. We'll also talk cooking, theater, film, and culture. My 2 reasons for starting this podcast: to entertain, to inform, and to make people vegan. Oh, that's 3. Shit. Welcome to the Glen Mercer Show. You could find us across all your favorite podcast platforms. You could find us on YouTube. Please remember to subscribe. And you could find us at realmeneatplants.com. My guest today, who we're going to call John, has an important story to tell, and it does take some measure of courage for him to tell it. So I want to thank John for joining me, and I want to ask my vegan followers and people with strong opinions about animal rights to please hear my guest out. Please don't be too quick to judge. John is making a brave decision today in speaking with me. And I think there's a lot we could learn from him. I think he deserves your respect and your encouragement. So, John, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Glenn.
John, as anyone could tell from looking at you with that hat, you're a cowboy. How long have you been a cowboy, and do you currently work as a cowboy?
I currently do not work as a cowboy. I started cowboying when I was about 20, and I'm mid-40s now.
Okay. And you grew up in kind of an outdoor culture. Tell us about that.
Sure. So I feel like I had kind of a neat childhood. My parents just let us kind of run wild. Basically, we lived in the country. I remember I got a BB gun for Christmas when I was 6, and we had axes, knives, fire. From early on, we just kind of had played outside. As a young kid, I got a teepee, like a Native American canvas teepee, and I set that up in the yard, and I'd live in it all summer until it got too cold. Then I moved in the house through the winter, but I stayed in that pretty much all summer, all through till I graduated high school and left home. I'd live outside in that. My parents did not hunt, but I took interest in it early on, and I went deer hunting. When you're 14 years old, was the youngest that you could hunt big game where I grew up, and so I started hunting deer when I was 14. And I remember killing my first deer.
Take a deep breath, John. I'll alert my listeners right now to the fact that John has gone plant-based. He is, for those of us who are trying to turn this into a more peaceful world where animal rights are respected and where people eat like human beings, plant food, John is on our team now. So we're just listening to his story about how he came to where he is now. And, he grew up in a different culture than I grew up in, to be sure. I grew up in suburban Long Island and didn't live in a teepee. So, this story, I think, has a lot to offer us. So, John,
thank you. So,
I know you feel bad now about the hunting you did in the past,
sure.
But the point is that you grew up in that culture, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I guess what the point I wanted to make was, even though I did that, I didn't enjoy the killing aspect. Like, I loved being out. I loved I mean, it is like if you haven't hunted, it can be very, very boring, and then it's very, very exciting and intense and adrenaline like crazy. And I just love the adventure of it, the being outside all day, the self-sufficiency feeling, and and like a lot of us who don't, if you don't grow up vegan, you just sort of think you have to do it. And honestly, from the time I was 14 years old to when I killed my first deer until adulthood, so, with my wife and I continued to hunt deer and elk, and it was something I did every fall. I never got excited about hunting season like a lot of people where I live in the West. It's like, and I mean, all across America, it's a huge deal. Hunting season, people get so excited. I never had that. I just wanted to go out, take care of the job, get home, and be done with it. Like, and we ate meat because we thought we had to. And honestly, the word protein never even, I don't think I ever said the word protein. Oh, this is interesting. I'm thinking there were times when I was cowboying and I used the word protein, it was all in relation to what grasses have the most protein to fatten cattle the quickest. That's
Mhm.
I just never thought of that. Right there shows you the protein is coming from the grass, not the cow. But
Right.
my wife and I ate meat because we thought we had to, and I always thought it was for hunger. I always thought I'd get too hungry if I did not eat meat. So I continued to hunt because we wanted meat, and it was the way for us to get meat the most inexpensive way. I could do it myself. My wife helped me butcher them. We butchered the elk and deer ourselves, wrapped it, froze it. And I always, not that it's right, but I always felt a certain sense of kind of, I thought at least I'm doing it myself. Like I'm not going to the store and paying people to do the dirty work for me, and I take it home in a neat little package. Like I always had some kind of pride that I was like, at least I have the courage to do this myself if I'm going to choose to eat this. So yeah, yeah, I always thought I was a little bit better than people that just would go to the grocery store. And then that being said, even though I was in the livestock industry, cowboying, we still wouldn't buy beef because I knew what was in it and I didn't want to eat that. So we're eating elk meat and I'm making a living by moving cattle. Like,
Uh-huh. And what did you know about what was in the cattle that made you not want to eat it?
sure. So I didn't have as much problem if someone butchered a yearling on the ranch and like gave me meat, that would be okay. I know that those cattle though are still going to have growth hormones in it. They're going to have plenty of vaccines. They could have been doctored with antibiotics if the calf had been sick and needed to be doctored in its lifetime. But so that I didn't have as much concern about, but it's definitely like in the grocery store. I don't think I've ever bought a package of beef in a grocery store in my life, honestly.
Okay. Now, tell us about the transition. I believe it was your concern about health that
Yeah,
that changed your diet.
sure. So one of the earliest stories I can remember, in this is my memory, so I don't know if things are exactly right, and I have to ask my parents again, like to clarify. But one of the earliest stories that made a deep impression on me was that my grandfather grew up very, very poor, in the woods. They pretty much lived on deer meat and potatoes. It was during the Depression, and his father had stomach cancer, and they're in a little log shack in the woods, and they're too poor for medicine or any kind of treatment, and so he's literally dying of stomach cancer. And my grandfather goes into his room one night, and his father's sharpening his pocket knife, and my grandpa's like, "Why are you sharpening your knife, Dad?" And the story, the way I remember it, he said, "I'm gonna kill myself." So that story's been in my head for a long time. That and our family history of cancer is extensive. Um, it's just pretty much. I feel like I spent half the time in a funeral home.
A lot of deaths from cancer in your family.
Yep. And so anyway, that story stuck with me, and I thought, oh man. And then my grandpa ended up he also got cancer. And I remember maybe some of this might be too difficult. So I guess I was convinced I guess I came to the realization I was just going to die of cancer like all my other relatives. I just thought that's our family story. So that's kind of how I spent most of my life, just figuring someday I'll get cancer and die. Even though my wife and I, we were quite health conscious, even though we're on the standard American diet, we didn't eat a lot of processed foods, didn't eat much, I mean, I like sugar, but tried not to eat too much, all these little things. And then I guess what really started the whole thing was, so I'm still a custom saddle maker. So I'm still making a living in the industry of cattle. Basically, I make saddles now for working cowboys and working cowgirls. I no longer cowboy personally myself, but I'm still earning a living through the industry. So in the saddle shop, I listened to a lot of books on tapes. A couple of years ago, before I discovered podcasts, my wife would bring home CD books on tape from the library, and I'd listen to them in the shop while I'm working. And I'd listen to anything she brought home. One day she brought home a book called Born to Run by Christopher McDougall. And I put it in, started listening to it, and it was about humans and traveling afoot, running. And they end up going into the Copper Canyons of Mexico with the Tarahumara native Mexicans, and they talk about their diet and how far they can run. And I was just so fascinated. I listened to it 2 times in a row. Like it's an epic story. If a person hasn't read it, it's amazing. But it talked just a little enough about the diet that got me thinking. And I'm not sure what I listened to next, but when I heard there's a link between diet and disease prevention, I was all in. And then so then I was like, maybe there's a way to avoid these cancers that have seemed to plague our family.
All right.
Then,
so you come to the conclusion there's a relation between diet and cancer, as there of course is. But then what was the next step? What kind of diet do you go on?
Right. I think we ended up watching that documentary, What the Health. And that was the first and then I saw that about dairy, and I was like, okay, I'm giving up dairy. I'm off of dairy. Like, yeah. And we pretty much transitioned more or less, I'd say, cold turkey. And this was in like 2020. And I'd say a big part of this that helped me sort of make this transition was this was like at the height of COVID. And no matter your beliefs, everyone at that time was kind of shut down and locked in. And it kind of gave me, it cut just enough tethers or whatever from kind of my old circles. Like it kind of disrupted things enough that I kind of was able to start changing what I ate privately. I wasn't around people, and
So
the ball started rolling.
nobody had to know that you weren't eating dairy. Or then when did you stop eating meat?
Yep. I'd say pretty short after that. I think we did a 2-week. My wife and I were like, let's go 2 weeks plant-based, try it, no sugar, super extreme, like just very much whole food plant-based. We did the 2 weeks. We felt really good. Kind of went back to our, eat milk meat again and stuff. And then a little while later, like, let's try it again. And then I think we had, like we maybe ate turkey on Thanksgiving and a sausage on Christmas. And then after that, our family tradition was eating Swedish sausage. I ate it that Christmas. And I was like, I'm done. I'm not interested anymore. And my wife was like, me either. And we just, yeah. And then
So that was
slowly started,
Christmas, what,
I think
2021?
2021. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So
Yep.
you've been now plant-based for 2 years, 2 full years.
Yep.
Have you
Exactly.
noticed any changes to your health?
Well, so going into it, like we didn't have like, so like lifestyle diseases, we weren't overweight, we didn't have diabetes, we didn't have a lot of these things that some people have. We felt, we were very active, seemed healthy, but I do feel, we both feel better, like lighter, definitely lighter, more energy. Not, we don't have like that afternoon crash that we kind of used to have. I did give up coffee also, which might play into that, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay. So your diet changed completely. And then how did that affect your feelings about the animals? You used to, after all, be a cowboy who would
Yeah.
rope the cattle and I
Yeah.
guess dehorn them and do different things,
Right.
castrate them. Now looking back on it, what changed?
Sure. So I want to just say, like, I don't want to like glorify, I don't want it to sound like I'm glorifying the lifestyle or what we did or how it's done. Like, there's already so much glorification around the American cowboy. Like, it's worldwide. It's like the thing. Like, everyone knows what the word is. There's a lot of stuff that people don't know exactly what the word means. There's a lot to it. The word to people to the industry means something different than the general population. For us in the industry, you kind of have farmers, you have ranchers, and you have cowboys. Farmers stay home, grow hay, grow crops, uh, fix machinery. Ranchers also grow hay. They feed cattle. They calve out the cows in the springtime. Um, they do ranch type work, irrigating, and then the cowboy specifically. If a person cowboys, that kind of means that you live out on the range with the cattle, taking care of them, uh, on the landscape, and that's done with, specifically done with horses. Like, so it's a horseback job, uh, and it's just so interesting. You think you're doing so much good, like you're so compassionate for the calves, trying to save their life, or you have a pink eyes running through yearling heifer herds and they're all getting pink eye, and you need to be out there roping them, because there's no way to, I mean, we're talking, these are beef cattle on public lands, generally could be desert, can be mountains, and they're just turned out on public domain for the entire summer season, and someone needs to be out there to kind of keep track of them, keep them on good feed. You want them to grow, you want them to get fat, you want them to be healthy. And so we do things called ride health, where you're looking for sickness and that, like, so pink eye, and the only way to doctor these cattle is uh, you need to basically chase them down horseback with your rope. People might think of a lasso, but we don't use the word lasso. It's not a word that's used among working people, but we use a rope, a lariat. You rope them around the neck, you stop them with your horse. There's all these different techniques, but you get the cattle down, and then you put medicine in its eye and put a patch over its eye and let her go again, and the patch will fall off and she'll recover from pink eye. If you don't doctor a pink eye, they'll go blind. If they go blind in an eye, they're too nervous and they can't eat because they probably can't keep their vigilance up for predators, and so they don't gain weight. So it's all about trying to help them gain. If they're sick with pneumonia, you need to start doctoring the calves for pneumonia. Um, and like, I mean, I've literally watched wolves kill calves. Like, I've witnessed it. I and I've chased the wolves off. I've really foolishness. I've chased a grizzly bear off of killing a yearling. And we do all these things to try to save these cattle, and we brag about like what we went through and risked our lives to save a calf. And then, 6 months later, we load them onto a truck, and then all they are is a dollar sign at that point. It's
Right. You're saving them for slaughter.
exactly right. Yeah, yeah, yep. And I mean, it's just hard because ranchers, and I mean, there's some people, there's some ugly people in the industry, but then there's a lot of really good people that, really care about their cattle, and kind of back to the lifestyle piece, without, I mean, it is a really neat way to live a life, like totally outside with horses, with cows, tons of excitement. It's very difficult to do the job well. To be like a good cowboy is really hard. Like, a lifetime of work to become really proficient. To we use words like read cattle to like anticipate what a cow's gonna do. You have to really be in touch with a lot of things that people nowadays just don't, yeah, don't get to experience it. Yeah.
When you'd be working on a ranch and there'd be other cowboys there, were there certain signs that somebody wasn't a real cowboy, didn't know how to do their job correctly?
Mm, yeah, there's definitely. So I've also worked at sale barns where people bring their cattle to an auction barn, and in that culture, there's a lot of abuse, a lot of ugly. Just and when I worked there, like I knew. So I guess a lot of these things that I kind of want to express is, even though I was with a lot of these people, and in the hunting culture, I've guided elk hunters, like paid clients, took them in the mountains to kill elk. I've yeah, I've been with cattle. I've been at the sale barn. There's always a mentality that like I didn't align with. Like I knew inside of me, I was like, I don't think like that person. Um like at the sale barn specifically, like that was not my crowd. It was very abusive. Um, yeah, the employees there, like that was hard to be around. Now the cowboying, the people that I worked with and worked for and worked around were conscientious people that really, honestly, I think they're doing good. Like we talk about using cattle to manage the range and to better the grass, and um, but now I just think that it's not necessary. And now that I know I don't need to eat meat, um, I just realizing all these things that we did and took so much pain and pride in to do it well, we just basically don't have to do it. Like, I'd mentioned to you, like we have a whole term of low stress stock handling. There's a whole technique of how to handle cattle, quote unquote, with low stress.
And what does that
And
mean in this case? What's low stress cattle managing?
sure. So the way it could apply like out on the range with cattle that are loose is if you need to move those cows somewhere, and just all these things come to my mind, like there's um like generally in the industry we kind of classify cattle as yearlings, heifers, bulls, cows, pairs, whatever. But if you just out on the range when everything's mixed together, all classes of cattle, we call it stuff. Like, oh, there's a bunch of stuff over on Beaver Creek, or I saw a bunch of stuff up on Bacon Ridge. Like that strikes me as interesting now, our terminology that we've used to maybe kind of keep a disconnect so we don't, yeah, think too much about it.
What
But
did they
that's
mean
just
by stuff in that context?
that just means a mix of cattle. Could be some, couple yearlings, a couple pairs, and a bull or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I guess I kind of, so the low stress. So if you're out on the range, if you want to be kind of use low stress techniques, you're on your horse, you kind of move opposite of how a predator would move. The way that I was taught was predators, when they're going to go into cattle, they're kind of slinking around, S turning. But when we move cattle horseback, we want to be use straight lines. Like we'd ride our horse if there's a cow and you want her to go the other direction, you ride like you're going to ride your horse straight through her body. You come at her with like quite a bit of energy on your horse, and she'll feel that energy and she'll turn to get away from the pressure and go the other way. The moment she steps away, you stop your horse and back off. So she feels that release of pressure. So now she understands, like, if I come towards you, I apply pressure. And as soon as you go the direction that I'm opening up for you to direct you to, as soon as you step that way, I'm going to take the pressure off and you're going to feel that release. So she's constantly hunting the release of the pressure. And that's, one technique we would use.
Now,
Instead of just, oh, God.
Fair to say that you were able to justify everything you did as a cowboy in the belief that people had to eat meat, right?
Exactly. Yep, for sure. I thought we have to, I knew there's people who are vegetarian. I mean, of course I knew that they were out there. And in fact, my sister and her husband were vegetarian for a period of time. And, in my head, I just kind of thought, I don't know how you can get by, but that's, fine for you. Yeah. But
since,
go ahead.
Since most people eat meat, it seemed to you, I'm presuming, a natural part of human life. And so therefore this work had to get done.
Yep, had to get done. And I thought, again, kind of like the hunting, like at least I'm doing it ethically. Like at least I'm not abusing the cattle. At least I have compassion for them. And again, in the industry, like at a branding, which is very barbaric, looking from the outside in, but at a branding, if you're a guest to someone's branding and you were like jerking on your horse, or gave your horse a belly kick, or a calf, like they're branding the calf, and then you got frustrated and like kicked the calf, or like somehow quote unquote abused the cattle, people probably wouldn't say anything at the moment, but you would be like basically kind of cut out you'd be ostracized from the community. Everyone would be like, yeah, you don't want that guy you're branding, or that girl. They'd be, yeah, like that person's abuses their horse or abuses the cattle. So even though we're doing these, like castrating these bull calves at a branding, it's like okay to like cut their testicles off with a knife, but you can't like get mad and like kick it in the ribs or something.
Right. So
these rules.
Whatever cruelty was being done to the animals, you tried to keep it to a minimum, and you tried to, you were, the goal wasn't to inflict harm, even though you were.
Exactly. It's the irony now, looking at it from the outside in, is like you can abuse them only if it's within these parameters.
Right.
Yeah.
But now that you know that human beings are much healthier when they don't eat meat, and now that you're thriving on a plant-based diet, you look back at all that and tell us how you feel.
It's confusing because, like, honestly, for me, like me personally, like again, I don't want to like either like glamorize anything. But when you're cowboying for a living, it's not just a job. It's not like you just go to work and you come home. Like when you are full on cowboying for a paycheck, that kind of means that like in the ranch culture also, like if you're a ranch family, you don't have outside interests. It is all on the ranch or all cowboying. Like for me, when I was in the thick of it, it was like I was in cow camps all summer. I was away from my wife. I'd be in the mountains, mostly living completely alone for days or weeks on end with nothing but my horses and cattle. When your recreation, like I know this sounds sick, and I'm not like I mean, it could be very, I'm sure this could be very upsetting for a lot of people. Going to branding is like a highlight of most everyone's. That was a highlight of my year, was springtime, when we get to go to brandings and we just would get to rope all day. I think roping was my favorite thing to do. I love to rope cattle. Like I had a little wooden dummy, like a sawhorse in the yard, and I would spend, if I wasn't working in the saddle shop or working with horses, I'd be at the at my roping dummy, like how a person would shoot hoops in the backyard. Like um everything I did was built around horses. My entire community was with the cattle and horses. All of my friends, every book I read was about cowboying. Every recreation thing I did, it was, we'd go camping with our horses, or I'd go to a competition and rope in a competition. We'd go to clinics, to like colt starting clinics, and watch people learn better techniques to start horses, colts. Um, I had zero outside interests, zero. It was my living, it was my hobby, and it was in my downtime. It's all the information I consumed. So when I started to realize I have to give this up, um, it's just, yeah, I still haven't recovered.
Mhm.
It's very difficult.
Because it became part of your identity. It became your identity.
Absolutely. Yep. And
And
now it's,
and and now I take it you struggle with the fact that you don't believe in that life anymore. You don't believe in that identity. You see that it does only harm.
it's so true. Yep. It's so true. And of the three kind of big pillars of veganism, I guess you'd say, is like animals, health, and environment. And I came to it for the health strictly. I discovered the environmental impacts of what livestock industry is doing worldwide, and the environment is like so important to me. Like ever since I was a little kid, I mean, the environment was like, has been um probably the biggest theme in my life, is like the environment. So once I realized that, there's no way. And then the animal rights, because I mean, I I'm not at all for abusing animals, but I guess I just was so much in that culture of it for my whole life, of not enjoying taking life, but just seeing that that's, you just sort of, I don't know what the word is, you get numb. I don't know if you get numb to it. So anyhow, the animal rights, I was my kind of last piece. Like I'm definitely not into abusing animals, and there's no reason to for them to suffer. And so now it's as equally as strong as the other three. But that's kind of the way it came for me: health, environment, animals. Yeah.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
and so now that you're working in a field that is still related to the cattle industry, do you
Yeah.
struggle with that?
Oh, every day. Yep, I do. And I'm definitely working towards uh getting out of it, like to find a second, yeah, another source of income. But I guess like, to be honest, I could just quit making saddles right now and go to the grocery store and get a job. But I really don't want to do that. So I'm like trying to get by here for a little bit. I'm not taking any more orders. I have orders that I'm committed to, that I'm committed to fulfilling for my customers. And then I hope by summer I can, I'm working very hard to find, yeah, alternative source of income. But I've gotten so spoiled of being like fairly independent, my own boss and all these things. It's yeah, it's difficult.
What about your friends in the community? How many, if any, know about your diet, and your wife is on the same plant-based diet?
Yeah. So I have one friend that's in the industry that I've confided in, who knows the true me. In the last branding that I went to, I went up to help with him and where he was working. And it's just the irony was like it was too much for me to hardly bear. I'm at a branding and everyone's we take lunch break and everyone kind of has their own food to eat lunch, and I'm eating secretly. I have a burrito, but I'm not going to tell anyone what's in this thing, and I'm hoping they're just assuming it's a, you know, a meat in my burrito. No one
Uh-huh.
asked, but yeah. So I've talked to him a lot about it. He's also a very compassionate individual. He has a lot of he's a very thoughtful person, also has done a lot of research, and we have a lot of interesting conversations about mostly about the landscape and like can is cattle actually a tool to better the environment, or no matter what are cattle going to degrade the environment. So we
Mhm.
have some, yeah.
All right, we're going to take a brief break and we'll be back with John, the former cowboy.
If you want to optimize your health by following a plant-based low-fat diet, look into the education, events, recipes, exercise, fun, and more provided by the Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group at pbnsg.org.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John, the plant-based ex-cowboy. Still got the cowboy hat though.
Yeah. Yeah.
John, tell us about would you see differences in the land when you worked on a ranch and there were a lot of cattle on the land? Did you see it degrade over time?
Yeah. So where I would work is I was in the mountains or the desert in a cow camp. So it's a seasonal, it's a, this is where ranchers pay the government, the federal government, for the right to run cattle on our public lands. And
And
now,
they tend to pay what, about $1.50?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's, and if you're to run that same cow on private land, you're gonna it's pay like $20.
Right.
So there's, you know, it, that's the other big piece. Okay. Yes. Yeah, definitely. We definitely riparian zones where I'm at in the Intermountain West, riparian zones, which means where creeks and water sources are sensitive areas. The ground is, you know, it can be muddier, it's not as firm. And the cattle, if they congregate at water sources, they can degrade the water. The bank cave the banks in. When the banks cave in, the creeks widen and the water gets shallower, it gets warmer. The fish don't fare as well because there's not cut banks for the fish to hide under. These are the things that we had to kind of pay attention to. As a cow camp cowboy, your job is to try to keep cattle off of sensitive riparian zones. Now, interestingly enough, wolves and grizzly bears, which are native to where I live, that used to be their job. They would keep the elk, bison, deer, whatever, scattered and not caving in these same sources. However, we removed bears and wolves, put in cattle, and cattle are lazy and they want to just stay on the creek bank all day where it's the easy grass and easy water, and then they flatten the creeks and ruin them. But now they've reintroduced wolves, so that might help to, that's the wolves' job, is to keep the herbivores scattered.
And your job is to keep the wolves from the herbivores.
Yeah, right. And then, yeah. So there, some of my issues now is I just have problems with, yeah, the cattle industry does not pay its fair share to run on our public lands. They don't even begin to make up for what it costs us to keep the cattle on the private lands or on the public lands.
And the quality of the soil, would that change over time?
Yeah, interestingly enough, like I didn't see any, I didn't see like that kind of stuff. They could, yeah, they could definitely hammer an area, but then the way, like at the camps that I was in, we always monitored grass. The Forest Service would come up, we'd have these plots, we'd measure the grass, what type of grass it was, how tall it was, and then using that information, it was on the a pasture rotation to where we would move cattle, like to try to keep, from my understanding of it, they kind of always, the Forest Service kind of seemed like grass at a certain height was ideal because it would protect, it would be short enough to like allow new growth, but it would be enough grass left over to protect the topsoil or the creek bank or whatever the case may be. So pastures that get used definitely look different because there was a neighboring allotment, and allotment is just a allotment is like your grazing area. So different ranchers or different associations have different allotments. A neighboring allotment was let go, like the Forest Service no longer let cattle in there, and the grass on that side of the fence was like, it was like prairie grass compared to like where we keep our cattle was like lawn grass. So it's definitely a different situation. And then people in the industry though say, oh, you need cattle for fire mitigation. Like you got to keep that graze down or you're going to have too many wildfires. I don't know. That's all beyond my, yeah.
So you were often dealing with the younger cattle, right? And then they would get shipped off to feedlots. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there's kind of different ranches kind of operate differently. In where I'm at, we have a lot of they're cow-calf operations, meaning they keep a herd of mother cows that have a calf every year. If a cow in the fall is open, which means not pregnant, she gets shipped to the packer. Like if you're, you know, if you're a cow and you don't get pregnant, you're down the road. And then they have their calf herd. So then they have the cow and calf are together from the spring all through the summer. And then in the fall, you know, maybe this December, depending who you are, it could be October, December, you wean the calves. That means well, everyone knows what weaning means. And then some ranchers sell their calves on weaning day. They will like literally strip, this is another term we use, we strip the calves off the cows. The calves go on the truck and they go down the road to the feedlot, and the cows stay home. And here's another interesting term is balling. This is something I've been thinking about the last year or two. We use the term when cattle are upset and they're calling to their calf, we call it bawl. Like a cow, she's bawling for her calf.
BAWL.
Yep. And in humans, but in cattle, we don't say cry. Like you never say like a cow's crying for her calf. But in humans, we say cry. But because if you say the word bawl, that means that person really broke down hard.
Mm-hmm.
So in my head, I'm thinking like, you know, like if we're crying, that's like in my head, crying isn't as bad as bawling, but cattle bawl all the time. So like, again, there's like this other disconnect that I just thought was, yeah.
So in other words, there was a recognition that what the ranchers were doing to the cows was cruel or was affecting the cows emotionally, but it just became a term of use on the ranch in terms of the cow's behavior.
Yep. Yeah. And I think so much of this is we just think it's like a necessary evil. Like we all, even in the industry, you don't like to see cattle stressed. Like you definitely don't want them stressed because if they're stressed, they don't gain. Mm-hmm. And if they're not gaining, they're not making you money. So you do everything in your power to keep them from being stressed. Right. But anyway, so then I forgot kind of where we're going with this about I forget.
As you collect your thoughts, I'm going to give you a reflection that I came up with, which is that it seems to me that there are three categories of mindsets that we could talk about here. First, there were those, and they may have been in the minority, who were simply cruel to the animals intentionally, willfully, you know, from whatever psychic need they had to inflict pain on animals. And they may have been in the minority. And then there were those, certainly you were in this category, and many of the people I'm sure you worked with, who viewed these things as what you called a necessary evil. Because people have to eat meat, the thinking went, we have to do these things.
Yep.
And now there's the third category that you've entered, which realizes this is an unnecessary evil. There's no reason for any of this. The whole industry is predicated on a lie. And the lie is that eating meat is good for human beings when human beings are herbivores. And so you've entered that third category that very, very few of the people around you, the people in your community, are likely to move to that next step.
Yeah.
And that puts you in a difficult position because these are the people who were your friends and colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, like, sometimes I would just wonder what has happened to me. Like, honestly, my old life was easier because I thought I knew exactly who I was, what I did. I took a lot of pride in it. And now it's like, I'm no longer that, but I'm also, even though I'm a plant-based eater, I'm not vegan. Like, I don't feel comfortable in the quote unquote vegan community, even though it's like all I listen to, every podcast is like health-based, all the big people in the vegan industry. But I don't feel like I'm not one of them either because,
Well, you're using the full definition of vegan, not just dietary, but lifestyle. You're not there yet because of your vocation.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also, like, again, back to kind of like the cowboying thing, like, there's so much kindness in it because, well, I don't know if it's, maybe this isn't true, but like, I'm just saying, like, there's like kind of this old adage, like, when you cowboy and you come home after a long day and you've been horseback, you always take care of your horse before your own needs. Like, you make sure your horse is fed and watered and turned out and comfortable before you go up to the cabin and eat or drink yourself. Like, that's like a unwritten, cowboying has hundreds of unwritten rules, and that is one of the main rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so weird. And that's the other thing that I kind of miss now is, in my old life, when I was like cowboying, I was with animals and caring for animals and hands-on with them, like communicating with them daily. And now I don't eat animals. And it's like, I really miss that, I don't have that connection that was so strong. So it's kind of ironic now. Like, I care more about animals, but I don't care for them.
You don't interact with them.
I don't. Yeah.
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 Now you're in a difficult situation because you've split with your former life, but you have a great blessing, and that's your wife is going right along on the same journey with you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And she's much more. So I'm very under the radar, very under the radar. And doing this with you is like, as you and I talked, it was a, a leap to do, but my wife is much more comfortable being vocal, like, which is super cool. And one of her best friends in town, their ranch family, and she has conversations with her girlfriend about how we eat and why, and that, just through conversations, I can kind of imagine this ranch wife. I can hear through. I can understand what she's kind of thinking and trying to sort out, like, getting this information that she had no idea about, and it can't help but make you think like that. If you allow yourself to think, it's yeah, it's pretty wild.
So when your wife talks openly about her diet, it sounds like she kind of outs you too, that you're eating that way with her, right?
I think so, because I asked her, I was like, do they know like
You
I
should
eat the
ask
same?
her.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
how do you if you met with a bunch of your male ranch friends from the past or cowboys, and you told them how you've changed your life, what do you think their reaction would be?
That's a good question. That's what my wife asked. She's like, do you think they're really gonna like not be friends with you? Or do you really think? And I said, I just don't know. I honestly don't know. And and I've gotten so kind of withdrawn into myself actually the last like 2 years that they've kind of just stopped. The phone just stops ringing. You say no a couple of times and the phone just kind of quits ringing. And
Right.
yeah, and so I haven't been confronted with that yet, except for my one close friend who's still in the industry. And I ate my food in front of him and I didn't feel awkward because I'm open with him. But anyone else, I'm not sure I have the courage to do that.
Right. So what do you like to eat? What do you like to cook?
Yeah, that's interesting. So my wife and I, we both like to, even when I was a little kid living in my teepee, I'd like a lot of times I'd be cooking my own food as a little kid. Like I love to cook. Um, so if we have arguments in the kitchen, it's like over who gets to cook because we both want to. Like it's pretty. um, so, but yeah, I love this question. We've kind of we've kind of gone like early on. I was like all about just the total starch thing because that was some of the first people I listened to. So it was very low fat, very
I
starch.
take it you listen to Dr. McDougall.
Definitely. Yep. Well, listen to quite a bit of that. Um, and so so for about a year we were like that. And then I kind of was like, I was like, man, I just think about food all the time. I'm kind of like lethargic. And since I stopped cowboying, I still needed an out for all my energy. I needed to be outside in the landscape. So ironically, with that book Born to Run, I picked up trail running, which I hated to walk. Even before I didn't even like to walk. Now, like I'm running and I bike. I like to mountain bike and cycle, and I go camping with my bike. So like I get kind of my outdoor adventure fix without the cowboying. It's different, but it's something. So I was like, man, I just don't have the energy. So I did a little more research and then we kind of upped our fat. Like, and Shelly, my wife, was kind of, I'm kind of like, I think I need like more fat. Like, I think there's something missing. So we started eating some more nuts and seeds, a little bit of nut butters. We were fortunate. We pretty much are totally organic. I can't bear the thought of like conventional, especially grains with the glyphosate. That's a huge thing for me. So we're pretty much organic. We do a lot more tofu now than we used to. I was kind of afraid of the fatness in the tofu, but now like, yeah, I love the tofu, the tempeh, lots of beans. We still eat lots of sweet potatoes and winter squash and stuff, but our breakfast, it's kind of changed, but right now, the last year or so, we eat what we call a breakfast soup. And we just, yeah, once a week, I usually the one that preps the soups and into old, big glass jars. I put in lentils, frozen broccoli, frozen mixed veggies, TVP, textured vegetable protein, a bunch of spices, and then sauteed onion and garlic. All goes into that jar, and then we just pull it out, and so that's our breakfast. And we usually put in like a hemp protein, grade fresh ginger on it, grade fresh turmeric on it, pepper, and then I'm pretty into sprouting, so we usually cover it in sprouts, and then raw cabbage, purple cabbage in the morning. So that's our breakfast.
Well, you're looking for a new career. It sounds like you could write the cowboy cookbook.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, exactly. So that's our breakfast. For lunch, we pretty much eat the same. Shelly leaves the house. She works out of the house. I work at the house, basically, my shop. So I eat in the house, but we both eat a big pile of greens and then just chop carrots, veggies, peppers, zucchini, cucumber, tofu, beans, cold black or pinto beans, And sometimes I put like sweet potato on mine. Shell makes homemade mustard, brown mustard, put that on top. So that's my lunch.
Now, is there a farmer's market or somewhere where you get your organic vegetables? I'm guessing there isn't a Whole Foods in your neck of the woods.
Unfortunately, no, there's not a Whole Foods. However, our local grocery store, as small as the town we are in, it's amazing organic selection. So we're fortunate for that. There is some farmers markets here in the summer, but honestly, where we're at, it's a fairly cold environment, so there's not a lot of produce. I mean, there are some, but it's mostly like, unfortunately, goat cheese and bison burgers.
Right. Did
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
any interaction with bison when you were a cowboy?
No. I found some buffalo skulls though, up in the creeks, ancient old buffalo skulls that had been preserved down in the mud. Pretty neat, anyhow.
Wow.
Yeah. And my friend has even found them where on the forehead of the skull it's chiseled out square, where a couple hundred years ago natives would break open the skull on the forehead to remove the brains to tan the buffalo robes. And he's found two different skulls that had been cut out where they had removed the brains to tan hides, probably 250, 400 years ago.
Well, clearly they weren't listening to my podcast.
No, but they didn't, obviously they were eating. That's the other thing that's got kind of ironic is there's so much emphasis on the hunter gatherer, not the gatherer hunter, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Your point is they may have been doing more gathering than hunting.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Even here, there's, quite a bit of wild, a lot of native foods to eat. Yeah.
Yeah. And so do you find that, how do you find eating now compared to eating in the past? Do you enjoy it the same amount or more or less?
More. And this has kind of been something I've been trying to work on, a personal struggle. I think about food because I think when I lost the cowboying life, I had all this energy and passion that I had nowhere to go with. And once that kind of happened the same time it happened because of the plant-based movement. So all of my energy, I had to go somewhere with it, and I shifted it to the food. And I think I might have started to form a little bit of an unhealthy relationship where it's like, I just think about food a lot. Like, and it's all I just want to cook. And yeah, it's kind of, I'm not sure.
Well, there are great chefs in the world who think about food all the time. Nobody calls that unhealthy. So,
yeah. And that's the thing is like, we love what we eat and we never feel, honestly, like, I think some family members think like Shelly and I have become very strict or limiting possibly and kind of depriving, but I feel like the opposite. And my wife the same way. We feel like abundance. Like I think of all the stuff I get to eat and how much I like it. And when I see other people eat, like sometimes I haven't been around people cooking much like in the last 3 years, and being around some people in the last year and seeing the conventional food, it really disturbed me, disturbed me. And it's like, I've forgotten, like I kind of used to eat like that myself, but to see it now was really shocking.
Now, how difficult would it be? And I imagine the answer is very difficult, but how difficult would it be to transition into organic farming and raising these vegetables yourself?
Yeah. So as much as I like to eat organic vegetables, I guess, yeah, the being a farmer does not appeal to me.
Okay.
Yeah. I've heard that you're either born a nomad or you're born a farmer, and to know the difference, if you're born to think of being stuck in one place gives you anxiety, then you're a nomad. If thinking of having to travel gives you anxiety, you're a farmer. And I'm definitely a nomad.
A nomad. All right. Well, then you need a career that keeps you on the road.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You could be a rock star, I guess,
Yeah. Yeah, if someone has, I mean, I'm soul searching for a new career. Like that's something that weighs on my mind daily of yeah, what does a person do? And yeah, what, how do you, yeah, how do you help people? That's what, like, I want to help people, but I oftentimes feel like no one wants to be helped, maybe.
There are millions of people out there who are suffering with their health and they want to be helped, but they believe that the only ones who can help them are doctors.
Hmm.
And the only way doctors could help them is with drugs.
Yeah.
And it's this mass delusion. Everybody's eating themselves into obesity, eating themselves into diabetes, eating themselves into cancer, eating themselves into heart disease, and they desperately want to find the doctor who gives them the right pill.
Yeah.
And the doctors themselves, for the most part, participate in this mass delusion. And they encourage this kind of thinking. And often the doctors themselves are overweight and have heart disease. And you look around and you think, how could people not figure this out? It's amazing to me. But they literally can't, even doctors literally can't seem to see the connection between what they eat and their own health. And they go to med school and they're never taught anything about it. And, to me, it's stunning. It's extraordinary that people don't make this connection. But we need to find something where you can go traveling and help people at the same time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, it's true. I, it's just, I feel like for me personally, when my food changed, my mind changed. Again, I kind of know, I always knew I was a little, I mean, I always knew I was a lot different than a lot of people. That's obvious. But with people that I was surrounded around who had similar interests, I always knew I saw things a little bit different. Cause like in the hunting culture, I did it, but I didn't like brag. I didn't want to tell hunting stories. It wasn't my thing. Like I just wanted to go do it, be done like a job, like cutting firewood, just get it over with. Um, the cowboying, like, um, I I liked it, but I didn't. But I liked it more for the adventure. Like I didn't. Um, I liked it for like the because you're getting paid to be out and adventure and it's exciting and all these things and the skill, so much skill involved. But I knew I didn't have the same mentality that some of these people in the livestock industry do, where they just feel like they're entitled and everything's here for them. Like the environment is just here for us to run our cattle on for our profit. Like I never felt that wasn't me. Um, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but I guess I just don't know where I fit in, like not with things. Like I just don't know. Oh, where my food, once that we started eating a little different, my brain, but I just changed even more. Like this whole gut brain connection, like in the your microbiome, like once that changed, like it really, I mean, I changed from the inside out. Like it's really, I feel a transformation, like physically and mentally, spiritually. It's really weird.
Tell us more about that change.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I always considered myself a compassionate person. Like I never, of all of the animals I've killed, I never liked killing any of them. Um, and I either did it because I thought it was ending their suffering quicker, or I thought I had to do it for my own quote unquote survival. Um, but now like I guess yeah hmm, I feel like I'm sort of being a little more open to like just more energy, just the energy to life in life. Um, yeah, there's just another layer that's not that you don't touch, that you can't see, you can't smell. There's this other layer to life that I feel like I've just barely scratched the surface, and very curious about, like, just an energy. Everything has an energy, and like maybe even just feeling it, like with the trees or the sagebrush. And it sounds weird, but like I just feel like there's another plane. And when you start changing your diet and you're not, maybe it's because you're not putting, no matter what, I think this has to be true. No matter what, if an elk doesn't even know you're there and you shoot it and it dies, there's still a moment that elk is like, oh man, like I'm dying. Or you take cattle and put them on a truck and they're stressed out for hours and hours on end, and they go to a feedlot and they're stressed out for 90 straight days under chronic stress and then get butchered. There's no way that some of that can't transfer into the meat and then transfer to you when you eat it.
Yeah.
And if you're only consuming plants who don't have a nervous system, I understand they're still alive and they grow, and there's those studies where they do plants grow better, listen to Bach than Metallica or something. I don't know. Like I get, so like there's vibrations, but I just feel like it's different if you're not eating an animal who has a will to live. Then yeah, and it's all about doing the least harm possible. And if you didn't have to eat plants to survive, maybe that's even less harm than eating plants. But that's not, then you probably will die if you don't eat something.
I think you need to eat plants.
Yeah. So,
think...
yeah. So, and the kind of the irony too, like back, just, I don't want to, when I was in this, my old life, like hunting and not liking it, like it sounds silly, but like I would always like take a moment and like just a moment of pause and just feel really bad for that elk, and just be like, and not that it'd do the elk any good. I mean, the poor thing's dead now, but like I guess I do it for myself, my own, trying to make myself feel better about what I was doing to, like, give it this little moment of quiet and appreciation before with the human brain, the gymnastics that we do to justify stuff it's wild.
Yeah.
Or at least for me.
I'll bet that there are many other people, even people who claim to take pleasure in hunting, who have these moments where they might reflect for a moment, and then they're back off to their cognitive dissonance, and then they deny it.
I think so. And that's what I would, how can you reach, because you see it like in younger kids, like they just love animals, like even ranch kids, like they just love animals. They want to like nurture a bum calf and take care of it. But then how do we break that disconnect of like all the compassion that like a little kid has, but then they can eat, the burgers at night. Like, how do you make the connection with people and adults too? Like, yeah.
And this is why people, refer to meat as filet mignon, and they have these different terms for it because they don't like to think of it as carcasses.
Yeah, right.
So
I wish maybe that's the secret, is if a person wants to eat meat, you need to like go like take care of it yourself or watch it be done. Like that's what they should. I mean, yeah, you can't make, but like if people saw what was happening, that might make them think just a little bit, like, and that's all it would take, just to break that one cycle. Yeah. and think just a little bit, that pause.
Yeah. So when you look back at your life now and your old friends and your old lifestyle, are there things that you could say you, in spite of what you regret about it, that you gained from it and that you could use moving forward?
Yeah, what is yeah, what skills do I have that are applicable to like this other life? I mean, I I don't want to go. I don't want to cowboy again. I don't want to be in that world. But that being said, like I mean, it was pretty. When I was in it, I mean, I loved it. I truly did, and I had made good friendships, had some pretty wild experiences. Um, the lessons that it would have taught, I maybe could have learned somewhere else, but just a lot of self-reliance. Living without, when I was like, you didn't have you don't have cell phone and Instagram out there. Like you're, yeah, you're living at a different pace. It's like, it's neat to, I'm so glad I got to experience that, because most people nowadays don't know what it's like to live without running water and indoor plumbing. And, and I'd lived it like that for, years and years. Like it was, yeah, it's a cool way to experience life. You don't feel, you definitely feel smaller. Definitely when you live like that, you feel, but how does it apply to today? I don't know. We didn't really talk about horses. Like, I spent a lot of time starting horses, and there's more lessons there to be learned, I think, through their, I don't know. Horses have a lot to teach for everyday life.
Now, when you would work on a ranch, would you bring your own horse to the ranch, or the ranch would provide you with a horse?
Kind of, so different places are different. I rode some company horses. Those are horses owned by a ranch, but I usually like to keep my own personal horses, or what we call outside horses. So someone like me, you're making a paycheck cowboying, but then you might take on some what we call outside horses, meaning horses that are owned by people in town or a ranch that want you to take their horse and put some hours on it, get it exposed to stuff, and make that horse safer, more trustworthy, more experienced. And by, since all of our work was done horseback, that's the perfect opportunity to expose a horse to all these things in life. So then you're making a paycheck by riding someone's horse as well as
so
your
they're paying you to ride their horse.
Yep. So I used to ride a lot of outside.
That would be like Hertz paying you to rent their car.
Exactly. Yeah. But
So,
you're having a mechanic on the car as you go. It's not just
right.
like, yeah. Yeah. And
how do you think the horses minded being, having a person on top of them and the saddle and all that, or they were okay with it? Is there any way to tell?
That's such a good question. I just listened to the latest Darren O'Lean podcast. He had a very interesting lady on with some horse stuff, and I listened to that, and that was powerful. So there's definitely a lot of abuse in the horse world, for sure. I mean, they're very easy to abuse. Like, it's ironic. If a horse only knew the power they have, we would never ride a single horse. They would be like as mean as a grizzly bear. But that's not how they're wired. And horses are just wired all about pressure and release. And if you make what you want to do easy, and if you make what they want to do difficult, they're going to do what you want to do. And there's nice ways to do that. There's ways to, when I was doing it, again, like, I'm telling myself, like, I'm using all these techniques that are like gentle on the horse, and I'm not physically forcing them. I'm always giving them an option. It's more of a mental, I'm trying to communicate the way they would communicate to each other in a language they understand. So, and we still own horses. We only have one horse now that we own. But I feel like, I don't know. From my experience anyway, if you're operating your horse the way that it kind of, okay, I'm being clumsy here. I'm sorry. I feel like, from my experience, horses take an interest in being around cattle. They're a social animal. And if you show the horse how to work cattle, meaning chase it, stop it, turn it, horses seem to naturally have a gift to do that. And a lot of horses seem to have kind of a natural instinct to like to do that and kind of enjoy it. Now, I know there may be people listening, and definitely horses are bred for this, like we call it cowy. Like a horse is very cowy, meaning that horse understands cattle and is very quick and wants to work cattle in a certain way. And that has definitely been bred into that horse. But our horses came off of the BLM, which stands for Bureau of Land Management. It's public. It's owned by the federal government. It's mostly desert land. In the state that we live in, we have a lot of wild horses that I'd call them feral horses, Mustangs, whatever. These are horses that were born out on the range. They live there totally without human contact, but the BLM gathers them once or every couple of years with helicopters, corrals them, sorts off the young ones that they can resell. And this is a very controversial system as well. But our horses that we got actually were raised on the desert, captured as like 2-year-olds, and then we bought them at auction and started them ourselves. So these horses had never been touched by a human. They were not raised in a barnyard around humans, and they made exceptional horses. Like they have like so much street savvy. They're very cautious, very intelligent, all sorts of cool survival instincts. And so even my horses that were not raised or bred to want to work cattle, they had a natural inclination to like to work cattle. Like even going to brandings where I'm roping cattle, branding calves. I had one horse in particular, and he seemed to like love to rope. Like, and it wasn't like I'm not like spurring him, I'm not forcing him. Like when I trained him, I exposed him to things that he's going to need to know about: ropes touching him, commotion, smoke, people running around, a lot of confusion. And this would be a whole other subject, but very carefully exposed him to scary things. And that horse has so much, he is so brave, and he does not get flustered. And he really seemed to, from my perspective, when we go to a branding, he would be perked up, looking around. He could feel the energy, and he seemed to like to rope and drag calves. Like, honestly, like I know they're not going to do it on their own if you're not on their back. Like I realize that, but I do think horses like a human connection. But whether riding them, putting a bit in their mouth, yeah, it can be very, very abusive. Like you could really hurt horses, and people have
and in some cultures they eat horses.
Well, that's the other thing I always wondered. Yeah, like, yeah, we think that's weird. Yeah, so right.
Different cultures seem to choose the mammals that they want to eat, but there's no science behind any of it.
No, and I understand, like, if you were a human 10,000 years ago and you're sleeping like literally on the ground with no synthetic materials, like like grass mats, and I think they had to eat things that we don't have to eat, like that. To eat, if an early human chasing down an antelope and killing it with an atlatl, I mean, that is not the same as going through the drive up and getting a hamburger. That doesn't compare. That early human needed every ounce of whatever they could get to make it to tomorrow. And so I don't know. I don't like this whole paleo justification, because that's like, we're not in the same world. Yeah, it's just not the same. So, and they weren't, they didn't want to live, or they didn't, we want to live into our 80s and be active. Like,
Right.
that wasn't an option for them. Yeah. So,
Well, it's been great talking with you, and I admire you so much for actually being conscious about your the life you led and breaking from.
yeah.
And I understand that it means that now you're facing all kinds of tough choices and a difficult transition, but it's a blessing that your wife is with you on this.
Oh man.
And I think you'll find some way to continue to do good in the world.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. Yeah, it means a lot. And it's not something I chose. Like, I honestly did not choose to go down this path, but I find myself here. And so I'm just trying to, like, honestly, just trying to be curious to see where it goes. And my wife and I are both committed to not, it's not even a struggle not to go back. Like, you just don't even,
Right.
I don't want to go back. But that being said, it's definitely, it's been difficult for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
It's tougher to make this transition where you are than in Portland or San Francisco or New York City.
yeah.
But it's good that you have a good source of organic vegetables nearby.
Yeah.
And it's really more, I guess, about the vocational challenges ahead of you than obtaining the food. So
Yeah, that's
that's
true.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's been, yeah, it's interesting. It's exciting. Yeah. I appreciate like all that you do and all the other people that I've gotten information from. It's kind of been overwhelming the last 3 years of like how much I've taken in. And I, like, since I'm so much like, this is like the content that I take in, I feel like everyone should know it. But then when I get out in the normal world again and hear people talk, I'm like, how do they not know this stuff? Like, is this not common knowledge yet? But
It doesn't even seem to be common knowledge with doctors. So yeah,
yeah,
for most citizens out there, they're still believing that people need to eat animals, and that single mistake that people make threatens to destroy life on this planet. So
yeah, yeah, and that's the bigger issue. Like, what, like, my story, like, is one, but like the global scale of what livestock is doing is like, I mean, and this is like, so like in my community where it's very, I mean, this is like a ranching community. Like, I mean, I listen to cows bawling at night when I go to sleep every night. We hear cattle calling. Like, it's like we are in the thick of it. And I think when you live in like this small community and it's your life and you grew up with it, you I think you don't really, you just see it like, oh, you have some cows and like how kind of romantic that looks, and you got the horses out there. And I don't think that even us who live in livestock, in the livestock industry in the west of America, you don't really realize that they're like mowing down the Amazon to grow soybeans or something. Like, I think you just don't really, like, yeah, we got some cows, we graze them on the mountain in the summer, the grass grows back next spring. It looks like a very sustainable cycle. I mean, it looks very sustainable, but that's not the issue. Like, this isn't, yeah, I think worldwide it's not sustainable.
yeah, and even where you are, I'll bet that the soil is being degraded. I'll bet that the rivers and creeks are being degraded.
Yeah, right.
And I'll bet there's less vegetation there than there was before this all started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, less biodiversity. That's, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Because the planet wasn't created to be populated just by cattle, with cowboys protecting them from the predators.
Right.
It's not the earth we inherited.
That's so true. Oh man, it's so true. And don't you think too, like this is how we've always done it, but it's like, no, we've done it for like 100 years. That's not like always. Like that is like a
That
blip
is
in
not
time.
always.
Yeah.
Let that be the last word. That the last 100 years is not always, and it's the insanity of what we've done in the last 100 years that we have to stop. Thank you for joining us. We all wish you luck, people who are listening. Thank you for listening, and feel free to post your comments. And I hope you'll show support for the former cowboy who is now plant-based. Thank you. This has been the Glen Mercer Show, where everyone listening turns vegan, regains their health, and annoys their friends and relatives. Find us on YouTube at The Glen Mercer Show and across all your major podcast platforms. Don't forget to subscribe.